So I'll be trying to cover most of the things in the practical way, how these things happen. So for example, what kind of standards are we talking about here? Okay. So for
Hmm.
example, when we are talking about US market, the common one is SOX when you're dealing with the financial audits. The other
Finance.
one would
Correct.
be
Correct.
other one would be SOC 2 Type 2 or
Yeah.
ISO or ITGC controls. So once
Yep.
you understand these controls, okay, once you understand the guidelines for these audit controls, you will have a basic idea. So for any audits, first you need to understand the standards, the guidelines, what kind of evidences would be there, what kind of things you need to achieve. Okay, so those guidelines will be covered under the planning. Okay, code of
Correct.
ethics and everything. Okay, then
Hmm.
the second part which says types of audits, assessments, and reviews. What will be the audit types? Are we going with end-to-end audits? Are we going to cover only some part of it? Like in ISO, you have multiple domains. SOC 2 has multiple domains. Are we only going with identity access management, or are we going only with the change management, or application security, or BCPDR, or are we going with complete IT infra or cloud infra? So there are multiple audits which happens in an organization. So all
Correct.
these things. Okay. Then the risk based audit planning. So that this is the most important part. So risk based approach. You need to understand. So there are various risk based guidelines. One is 31,000 ISO, which covers the enterprise risk management. Then we have ISO 27005, which will be covering the risk assessment, and one of the top one would be NIST risk assessments. So there are 853 revision 5 for the risk assessments. Then we have specific to the cybersecurity framework, which is version 2. So where
Okay.
you will understand these NIST. So usually for US clients, NISTs are essential. Okay, so you need to understand how to understand the risk, how many assets are there in an organization, how to do the department wise risk or asset based risk. How are you going to calculate this risk? What will be the calculation? What kind of implementation, controls implementation will be
Required.
recorded? Yep. So
Mhm.
everything will be there. So that will be amazing. Risk assessment is one of my best topic. Okay, so you need to understand the complete risk associated with the assets and how are you going to mitigate it, what are the challenges, because it
Correct.
looks very simple when you are doing this on the Excel sheet or and on any application, but implementing those things will take a lot of time and money as well.
And basically solve for my experience, because when there are interfaces, like if I work on the IT side of the SOX audit and there is a finance side of the SOX audit, and when of course the application talk with each other, there I see there is a lot of requirement to understand where the risk could coming from, because when the data flows from one side of the business to the another side of business, there is a lot of gaps, I would say, could see. And if you do not have the clear understanding how the data is flowing into the system and where could be the risk, we can potentially see, we cannot like find it out or like have awareness of it.
Exactly. So when we are trying to understand the risk associated with any application or infrastructure, you need to understand the architecture. Okay, so if you can
Correct.
learn how to read the architecture reviews, how to go through the flow diagrams, that will be very helpful. So, if
Correct.
possible, I'll try to share you some of those things, flow charts and everything for any application, and how to create the key risk indicators, especially for all the risk associated. Okay, so it could be
Correct.
related to the DLP, it could be related to identity access management. We have SOC, Security Operations Centers, SIEM, cyber threats and vulnerabilities. So there are so many things. Okay, so this is a very good topic. Okay, then
Correct.
type of controls. Okay, so what are the controls? What are the guidelines associated with that particular framework? How to choose which controls will be a part of this? Okay, and how we are going to implement those kind of things. Okay, so that would be a part of the planning. So various planning documentations I'll share you. Okay, I'll try to create. I'll give you some homework how to create this. What should be the process? So
Mm-hmm.
planning is, I'll say, that won't be a problem as you are a part of these audits. So that won't be a challenge. But we'll do some exercises. Okay.
Okay.
Then the second part about the execution.
Okay.
So any project execution, it starts with the audit project management. So
Correct.
any
Yeah.
audit, you need to understand how many resources are there, what are the challenges, how many resources will be required, whether the company has all the resources in place, what are the challenges. Okay, so before committing to any of these things, what will be the process. Okay, so that kind of things we need to understand. Okay, so are we going with the weekly phase or monthly phase, how we are going to execute it, how many people will be needed here, are we going to need extra budget for these things, who will be responsible if there are multiple departments involved in these things, how are we going to connect with them, whether everybody is on the same page, do we have the right people available in case of management executions and everything, or escalations, do we have everything in place. So that kind of stuff will be a part of
Correct.
this one.
Mm-hmm.
Then the audit testing and sampling methodology. So
Methodology.
here,
Yeah.
yeah, so here you need to understand what kind of audit you're going to do, pre-assessment, post-assessment, that kind of stuff. Understand the audit testings, okay, and sampling methodology. So this is very important. So for example, some audit will say that we need evidences for each month. Sometime they'll say we need only for a quarter. Or
Quarterly.
yeah, some says that we need weekly audits as well. So sampling methodology is very important. Okay, so every company or these application owners or companies, they will have their own guidelines. So you need to understand how are you going to go with these methodologies, how many samples are you going to do for like incident management application, like VAPT pen testings. Okay, so are we going with once in a year or once or twice in a year, what about external audits, or what about internal audits? All these things will be covered under sample methodologies. Everything from incident management, change management, uh,
Correct.
BCPD, or all those things. Okay, whatever the controls are implemented, we need to check the sampling methodology, which is approved by the management.
Correct. Yeah.
Then audit evidence collection techniques. So here we'll be talking about what kind of evidences are we going to take, okay? Because most of the time they'll just provide you the risk assessment, or they'll just provide you, yes, we have everything, we have the policies, but are we going? We have to cross verify these policies with the evidences. So this is
Correct.
very crucial here, okay? Because when you are part of the SOX audit or any audit, SOC 2 type 2 or these important audits, where company has to do get the certification for the business purpose, they need to provide the right evidences, okay? So
Mhm.
this is very important. How evidences will be collected, whether the screenshots are enough, are you going with the automation scripts? There are various methods for different controls.
Correct. Okay.
Okay, then we have audit data analytics. So here, whatever the data comes, okay, how we're going to use the data analytics like Excel sheet or any other stuff, how we are going to verify these things, how we are going to sort those things, that will be covered. Then, fifth part would be the reporting and communication techniques, where how the reports will be created, how the reports will be collected, and how the communication happens internally and externally.
Got
Then
it.
we got the quality assurance and improvement of audit process. So
Correct.
what kind of audit happens? Okay, what was the reports? And the company needs to be available for continual improvement. So every organization needs to be aware that once you're done with the audit, you're not done with the security of your organization. It's a part of continual improvement process. So what will be the next course of action? The auditor needs to provide all those things to the company. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Then the most important part, one of the most important part is domain 2, which will cover 18% of the questionnaires. governance and management of IT. Okay, so this domain confirms to stakeholders your abilities to identify critical issues and recommend enterprise specific practices to support and safeguard the governance of information and related technologies. So, do you have any experience on the governance part, like creating the policies, implementing the policies, trying to understand the policies? Like, for
Yes.
example, if you're doing with the IS audit or cloud audit, so can you tell me more about the policies which you have created, and how did you create it? What was your role here? And
Yeah.
mhm,
So that's a good question, Sal. So let me explain myself. So I haven't created policies so far, but when we were talking about the domain one, where I was listening to you, like the first the planning and the execution part, I have in some capacity, I have been dealing with all those things. Like I was taking out the samples, I was testing the samples, what kind of sample we should have and something. So why I'm explaining it, then when it comes to domain two and you talk about IT governance, the team I work with that takes care of complete compliance of the company. So they deal with HIPAA, uh, whatnot. There are so many which I am not directly engaged with. I'm just work with SOX, but they do a lot of those kind of a things. So even with when I work with Deloitte and they talk about the SOC 1 report or SOC 2 report for the application they are testing, and it is a third party application. I generally go through those SOC 1 and SOC 2 reports and generally provide it to them. And I have been thought about that what should be the key factors I should be looking forward in those reports. So there should be no flaws, like in terms of dates or the time of the audit period, or like how the in on a high level, of course, how the audit been performed. So and if there are any policy, and in terms of policies also, like if there has been any policies related to which we have in the company. So my boss directly uh, deals to write those policies and
mhm,
to go through those policies and everything. Like as I said, I am not directly writing the policies in the company, but
mhm.
like I am the mediocre when it comes to Deloitte or KPMG. When we need to provide those policies to them, I go through those policies. I understand the language of the policies should be having in terms of what we are going to provide to the auditors. But if directly I have written any policies, no, I haven't. I have not.
Okay. So to simplify this, you have exposure to the policies. The
Correct.
most important part here is you need to understand what is the difference between need, shall, must, these kind of words, which
Correct.
will be put into the policy. So yes, we'll be talking about different policies. Okay, and when you create any policies, it is not like just a vague thing. Okay, just I go to any
Yeah.
AI, or just I download the policies from any
Yeah.
websites. Okay, you can do that all the time. You will get toolkit as well in the market, but it won't help you much
Yeah.
unless you understand the requirements. So, what laws are you following? Are you
Yeah.
following
Yeah.
any regulations? Are you following any SOX, NIST, other regulations, GDPR? What about the
Correct.
industry standards, ISO, NIST, SOC 2 Type 2,
Yeah.
or CIS benchmarking? So you need to understand first what is the requirement here. And
Absolutely.
there is a possibility that there might be a policy which will be aligned to multiple frameworks as well. Okay, so it might be aligned with ISO plus NIST plus SOC 2 Type 2 plus HIPAA. It totally depends. Okay, there will be a chance you'll
Multiple.
see that multiple frameworks will be aligned in a single policy. So this is very
Correct.
important because you need to understand what kind of organization it is, what kind of frameworks are you are you working on, what kind of policies they have. Because when we say from broader perspective, we just need to check when was the policy created, who created it, what is the recent version, who updated it, okay, what are the requirements here in the policies. So a smart auditor, okay, whenever you go for any projects, always start with the policies. So you will understand the complete architecture, you will understand their approach, okay, how mature is the organization. And once you read these policies, then you need to check the evidences. So you need to check these, whatever they have written in the policies, whether they are implementing these things or not. So this is the major gap when the auditor, independent auditor, checks in whether you have a very nice policies, framed good words and everything. But when they ask for the audit samples and the evidences, things are not there in the place. Like for example,
And
use mhm.
and the policies should be for, so how we tag policies, we tag it against the applications or like against third party vendors or like how they are
Everything.
tagged.
Yeah, we'll be talking about everything. This is just an introspection. I just wanted to give you a broader picture. What are we going to cover? We'll be talking about everything. I'll try my best to cover all of your questions. Okay, so we'll
Okay.
talk about the practical implementations, everything. If you
Okay.
have, and if it would be better if you are coming with your own use cases or whatever is happening in your organization, so that
Correct.
we
Yeah.
can cover those things, so that it will be easy for you to relate these things. So you can come
Absolutely.
up with these things. I'll be more than happy to cover all those things.
No, that is what I will look forward to as well. Thank you.
Got it. Organizational structure, IT governance, and IT strategy. Very important thing here. So, a company, an auditor, or the GRC team, or the governance team, they should be smart enough. They need to understand whether what is the culture of the organization, what are the challenges, what are the things which we need to implement. Okay, so there might be the risk based approach every time. Okay, so whether it's a high risk, medium risk, low risk, so we have to try with the high risk related policies first. Okay, so we need to give the priorities. Okay, what will be the IT strategies here? How we are going to approach for to the organization for these governance, because governance will ensure that how the organization will perform or how they are going to work on these things. This is
Correct.
very crucial for any organization. If the governance, if you see that, for example, if the governance is not in place, or we don't have the management support for implementation of these things, that would be a challenge. For example, I was just going through some AI company recently. So there was a
Mm-hmm.
company which was very famous last year, 2025. The management said that yeah, it was good, and they got the valuation about 400 or 500 millions. And later on, they did the documentation for the first time. They didn't follow up for any of those things. They worked
Yeah.
on the applications, everything, no governance, no oversight, nothing.
Okay.
And now that company has gone down completely. They are in the loss because they didn't implement any governance.
Of
How
course. Yeah.
these IT things perform. Like for example, you must have heard about the Grok, and in that Grok was
Mhm.
providing nude pictures of the users. Why this
Mhm.
happened? Because lack of oversight and the governance. So
Mhm.
governance ensures that what needs to be provided, what needs to be stopped. Like for
Grog
example,
AI you're talking about.
yes, yes. So
Got it. Yeah.
if you remember 2 years back, we are talking about ChatGPT. When you say that I need to hack NASA, so he'll provide you everything. Yeah, this is the NASA architecture. You need to do this. You need to do this application. You need to do this. Or if you're asking him, yeah, can you please provide me I need to murder my uncle, or I need to murder my girlfriend. What will be the process? And
Correct.
ChatGPT was providing you all the answers, but
Wow.
that was very risky. This is not part of
Yeah.
the governance.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they need to understand where they need to stop, where they need to provide these things. So all these governance will provide you these things. So governance oversight committees are for these things. Because when the lawsuit happens, it happens for millions of dollars.
Correct.
When somebody sues the company, there is a big deal here. So the governance is very important. So we'll be covering a lot of use cases here, how to cover these things. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Under that, you need to have the IT policies, standards, procedures, and practices.
Practices, yeah.
Then enterprise architecture and considerations. Under that, the infra applications, AIs, everything will be covered. You
Mm.
need to understand the enterprise architecture. What are the
Basically, flow.
considerations? Yes.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
Architecture, flow, standards for any application or any infra or for a complete organization. You need to understand what are the control, what are the architecture, how many controls, or how many tools or these projects are involved. So project
Got.
wise, department wise, we have to cover these things.
Okay.
Then understand the enterprise risk management, very critical. So first thing here is the governance team will give you the guidelines. What will be considered, because when we are talking about risk assessments, we are talking about
Governance. Yeah.
likelihood into impact. So,
Yeah.
what will be the risk score? Who will be responsible for this? What will be the likelihood score? What will be the impact score? Are we going to, who will be responsible for this? Because right now, the risk team or the GRC team or auditors team, they are the one who is responsible for working on these things. Okay, but the governance team is the one who designs this. They cover
Correct.
everything. What are the financial aspect of these things? What are the
So,
complications?
so basically, when we talk about scope of the SOX audit, I talk about that how many application should be in consideration for the SOX auditing. That part should be covered here for the
Yes.
risk and
What
under
are
the
the
risk management.
application risk? Yes. So
Correct.
if you have, see, um, we have to go micro level here. Okay. So if you're talking about SAP ERP solution, then the risk might be similar. Okay. When we are talking about the ready-made applications or SaaS based, which you are
Correct.
taking. Okay. Then the second part would be the risk associated with, like for example, it's an in-house application. Okay, so in-house
Mhm.
application, you need to understand their architecture. Okay,
Correct.
what are the
Yeah.
risks if the data is being flown
Fast.
through CI/CD? Yeah, no, not platform as a service.
Mhm.
In-house SaaS we are talking about, not
In-house
yeah,
SaaS. Got it.
two things. Once when we get the services directly from the applications, ERP, Microsoft Office, O365, Chat GPTs, we are taking from the vendors. That's one thing. Okay,
That
that
is
will
SaaS.
be, yeah,
Yeah.
that will be. Then another software as a service is when you are building an application for yourself. Okay, or you are giving the services to the
Yeah.
clients
In-house.
in
Yeah.
house. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
will be scenario will be different here. How the architecture happen, how the data flows, what are the risks associated with these things, whether the data is secured when the data is flowing. Because when we are talking about these external vendors, when we are talking, then we can ask them, we can take the SOC 2 type 2 reports from them, and we can get the
Yep.
details. But
Yep.
here we have to provide these details. We need to understand what are the risks associated with internal application. What
Correct.
about the risk related to the network? What about the data transfers? What about the Docker, Kubernetes, depending upon the applications? Okay,
Correct.
so you
How
need to
they are
understand.
running,
Mhm.
yeah, where they're sitting and how they are running in the
Yes,
system. Correct. Yeah.
exactly. Privacy program and principle that is related to the data. If you're part of US, I hope you know the CCPA, California Consumer Protection Act. If you're part of Europe, then GDPR. If you're part of
GDP.
India, we got DPDP. For Saudi, we got PDPL. We got Singapore privacy laws, Australian privacy laws. So where the data will be stored? Are we following those regulations, the land of the
Correct.
law? Where are
Yeah.
we saving these things? Very important things. Like for example, if you're doing these financial audits and everything, so according to the FedRAMP and these federal contractors, you cannot keep this data out of the United States, or you can only keep on
Yeah.
AWS infrastructure, which are designed for the government only. Because AWS has many infrastructures, which is one is public cloud. They have specific cloud for for defense, for government
Mhm.
contractors as well. So all these
Makes sense.
privacy programs will be a part of this.
Makes
So
sense.
you need
And
to check. Mhm.
Just to let you know, Sal, because for a little time, I was part of the CIFIAS compliance as well in my
Mm-hmm.
company. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, in CIFIAS, we were dealing with, because we talk about a lot of US federal employees, uh, where we get to know their guidelines regarding, likewise, you were explaining that what data can be gone out of the US border and what should not be. So even when I travel to India, I should have some certain, set of permission I should have taken from my company if I'm taking my laptop outside US, US border. So for
Exactly.
CFIAS also I have dealt with, like, only for 2 months, but I have dealt with a lot of those kind of permissions and audits and something like that, where I get to learn a little bit about, like, how the US government like puts their instruction on these such kind of data, or just, if you're traveling outside the company, or even if we are hiring somebody like contractors or somebody from India, China, another part of the country, of the world, where, so how we should be utilizing it, and what kind of training and approvals they need to get through within the organization.
Mm. Exactly, exactly. What about the endpoint security? What about the server security? Like, for
Yeah,
example, one of the most important thing here is when you are sending or when you're committing any code, are you doing it from your own system? Are you going through the AWS? What about the GitLab, GitHub? What kind of data are we committing? Or if
correct.
you have multinational or it's a multinational company where the users are working from various different locations across the globe, then what will be the role for these things? Who will be overlooking this oversight? So there are many important things related to this.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, data governance and classification. So what kind of data will be considered as public, internal, confidential? So labeling is very important. So here labeling and implementation will be there. Outlook emails, the policies, the customer data, the company's internal data, what will be the classification, how to decide that, what about PII data, personal information, personal identified information, health
PII. Yeah.
related data, HPI, okay, so sensitive data related to the government. So all these classifications should be there, okay. Then
Correct.
IT management will be talking about the resource management, who will be covering what, okay. Then the subtopic is vendor risk assessments here. So when you're onboarding any vendors, okay, that is very challenging. It looks very easy, okay. Many companies like big four audit firms, they have specific jobs related to the TPRM, third party risk management, or vendor risk assessments. So like onboarding a vendor is very simple. Okay, for example, AWS is your vendor. If you are
Hmm.
giving services, outsourcing someone to your vendors, okay, they have access to your system. You have all
Salesforce.
the Mhm.
Yeah.
You have
Sales.
all the security. Salesforce, yes, that will be a
Mm,
part of the vendor.
mm.
So these big companies, they have everything in place. Okay, they have SOC 2 type 2 reports, they have network security, everything in place. Okay, but still we need to ensure, we need to check whether they are matching our guidelines. Okay,
Correct.
for example, recently you must have heard about Toyota or something. Okay, so what
Hmm.
happened, someone was able to hack the vendors, and through vendor they were able to get into the system of that company, and they were
Wow.
able to hack it. I hope you remember about the solar winds. Solar winds hack happened. More than 1,800 companies were affected because of the vendor. The vendor was
Wow.
hacked, and they have the password as Solar Winds 1234.
Wow.
And
My God.
that was a scandal of that decade. If you can just go and search Solar Winds, and
Okay.
through that, Microsoft and other different companies were affected. Government, federal government companies, many companies, because SolarWinds was the top vulnerability scanner at that time. So
Wow.
that's
My
why vendor security risk assessment is very important.
important. Yeah. I see that. Yeah.
IT performance monitoring and reporting. So all these, you need to take the data, go through those monitoring. How are we going to report it? Okay. The quality assurance and quality management of the IIT. This is very important. So just for the sake of guidelines or just following the normal audit process, that should not be the case. There should be a quality for this. Okay, so what will be the quality assurance method? How we are going to how we are going to audit these things? What will be the numbers? Are we going to do? How we are going to create a process so that when somebody audits in the future, they are going to follow these things. So governance will give you guidelines for everything: vendor risk assessments, IT strategies, enterprise risk assessments, and these guidelines will be implemented by the implementing risk team or the GRC team or IT audit team.
Mm. Yep.
So then we are talking about the information system acquisition, development, and implementation. Okay. So domain
Mhm.
3 and 4 offer proof not only of your competency in IT controls, but also your understanding how IT relates to the business. Okay.
Correct.
So
Correct.
here, when you are you are acquiring any application or you're developing any project or any application, what should be the guidelines? How you are going to cover these things? What are the aspects which needs to be covered under these things? Okay, so you need to understand the project management, project governance for these things, business case and feasibility analysis, system development methodologies. So we have here like NIST software development security lifecycle SDCL or SDLC. We have 2019 2021 version where there are the guidelines how you're going to proceed with the system development applications, that kind of stuff. Okay, the control identification and design to those applications, on premises, cloud, hybrid, AI applications, everything under
Correct.
these control identification. Information systems implementation, this will be the readiness testing implementations, everything will be covered under that, the VAPTs, automated scan, different things. Okay, implementation, configuration, and the release management. How you're going to release it version wise, what will be the process for the applications. So do you have any idea about development quality analyst kind of jobs or testing kind of things?
Yes, so testing definitely I have done on my part. Like exactly if you talk about control identification and design part, we like I have done the design and the effectiveness for the controls. Um, Not like design. When you talk about design, you're talking about like if I design the control or
No,
like
no, 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 no. Just my question here is, do you have the understanding how these applications are built software wise? They are connected to the databases, how the team develops, how these coding happens, the backup, the
so 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 coding, if you talk about CI/CD, no coding part because I'm not that technical, but
mhm,
the how the applications are connected and how generally they, likewise I said, even most of the applications uses AWS as of now as a platform. So if I have a bit of understanding, like I have those accesses in my company, like where those sits and how they, how like how the function,
mhm,
like the process in the system kind of a thing, a little bit of that, not like very, because we always talk with the cloud of teams when any such technical questions comes up. But when I test either the design during the walkthroughs or when I try to test the effectiveness of the control with the sampling and population we get for the things, then we have this a little bit of idea of this, that how the application is sitting in the system and how it should be processed and what should be looking forward when we are testing it, so those kind of things, but not very deep dive.
mhm, mhm. All right. So that's not a problem. So we'll go through the guidelines related to these configuration release management. Just was trying to understand what's your current experience on this part. Okay. So you don't have to be that technical. savvy here because you are not going to be doing the code reviews and other stuff. Okay, so
Yeah,
that's not the
yeah. But I
expectation.
understand the CI/CD pipeline, how it
Nice.
goes in. Yeah, and so that on a high level, of course. Yeah.
Understood. That's good to know. System migration, infrastructure deployment, data conversion. So all these development part. Post implementation review, how we are going to cover how these implementation happens, that kind of things under the post.
Correct.
And now the 26%, very important. Okay, so here, uh, information systems, operations, and business resilience. So domain 3 and 4 prove not only for your competencies in IT controls, but also your understanding of how IT relates to the business. So this is very crucial here. So you need to understand what are the IT components, what about the asset management, asset registers, what about job scheduling, production process automation, whatever the system interfaces. So these are all connected to the controls related to the ISO and
Correct.
ISD cloud compliances. So they are saying that under the CISA, you need to understand these controls implementations. Okay, shadow
Correct.
IT and user computing, all these stuff. Okay, so
Mhm.
what about the end users related security? Because these controls you will find on all the major frameworks. So we'll be talking about these things, whether these controls are mostly part of it, IST, ISO, cybersecurity frameworks, everything. Okay. System
Okay.
availability, capacity management. This is endpoint security. So have you or you were part of audits? Okay. So have you done any endpoint user or end users audits?
Yeah. Yeah. And user audits
Mm-hmm,
likewise I said that first we check the design part of the control.
mm-hmm,
Uh, then we get the sampling and we get our population, and then we go user by user, like in terms of, like you said, it should be a change management or access management or something like that, like those kind of a things. And then, yeah, of course, the change monitoring also, that if we see a deficiency and we cannot mitigate or remediate it on system level, we put a change monitoring control there, and then we test it either in via Zira or whatever the ideal process should be for it.
mm-hmm. See, when we are talking about end user computing, we are talking about the technical controls which needs to be implemented for these endpoint security. Okay.
Okay.
So, like for example, when we are talking about the laptops, when the company is giving to you, they
Mm-hmm.
are taking a risk here. Okay. In order to mitigate the risk, what they have to do here is they need to implement the disk encryption. Okay, USB disablement. Okay, they have to implement the group policies, endpoint security, firewall. Okay, then you have to do the remote wipeout. So these are all the controls implementation in order to secure a laptop. So even somehow your laptop
Oh,
goes
got it.
missing or
Okay.
someone steals it, they won't be able to get the data out of the system. So
Correct.
these kind of controls implementation they are talking about here. System availability, the capacity management, are the company able to manage? Capacity management is pretty easy comparatively because we have high scalability options on the cloud, and these things can happen anytime. For example, if you have noticed, like if you go to a Costco or these AWS or other marts, they have huge lines during the weekends or Black Friday and other things. What they do during this requirements, they add thousands of servers during these weekends and they use it for a couple of days, and automatically they will remove it. So this is how the scalability
Oh,
matters
got
here for the capacity management.
got it.
Problem and incident management, a part of ITSM, how you're going to manage the problem management, the cybersecurity incidents, incident management, the change management, configuration and patch management, operational log management. So we are talking about SIEM, or other logs? Are we going to secure the logs? Okay. IT
Okay.
service level management, part of ITSM, database management. Then business resilience. So we are talking about BCPDR. Okay, resilience is part of the BCPDR. So if you have 100 applications here, which applications will be a part of top 5 or top 3? And under that, you will cover these things under the business impact analysis.